One of the most promising things Star Citizen has to offer over similar space games is the prospect of large-scale org-based combat. With server meshing coming online soon, the possibility of hundreds of players being in a single server and playing together is ever more achievable. And with that comes the near arrival of what is going to be the first combat-centered capital class ship available to players, the RSI Polaris. Its cheap price and relatively small crew complement can make it seem incredibly appealing to smaller orgs, or as a flagship for a subfleet within a larger org. I myself have one of these pledged, and am anxiously awaiting its arrival. So today, I'm going to go over my thoughts on the Polaris, consider its ups and downs, and talk about what kind of role I see it fulfilling in an org's fleet. My name is Puffin King, and without further ado, let's get right into the video. In any sort of space universe, capital ships are an integral part of military structure. Nothing conveys sheer power more than a huge hulking gunboat bristling with turrets and dwarfing any starship that comes near it. Capital ships serve as a base of operations, often housing amenities and supplies. Any sort of military-focused organization with any sort of respectable member count needs some sort of capital ship at the core of their fleet, and as mentioned, many turn to the Polaris as a first pick. As of now, the pledge price for a Polaris is only $750, a mere $25 more than a Hammerhead. Compared to the $1,500 of an Idris or even the $3,000 price tag of a Javelin, the Polaris comes in as the current cheapest capital ship available, and you might find that this difference in price doesn't necessarily correlate to its difference in effectiveness. Now, arguably the most important factor to consider when evaluating the combat effectiveness of a capital ship is its ability to dish out damage. Capital ships, being on the larger side, have the ability to house more and higher damaging weaponry. The Polaris takes a bit of an unorthodox approach to this, however. While capital ships like the Idris, the Javelin, even the Bengal rely on large cannons or lasers to dish out the majority of their damage, the Polaris, being smaller, can't afford this luxury. In the interest of remaining compact, the large majority of the Polaris's DPS is going to be coming from its torpedo complement. Its relatively small size and superior maneuverability over others in its class means it is more suited to effectively utilize a weapon such as this, which requires aiming of the entire ship towards the target, unlike a turret. The sheer damage output of torpedoes means the Polaris would be able to tackle ships much larger than itself, and do so very quickly, then flee the scene before the opposing fleet could effectively respond. It's the king of hit and runs. Now, the issue with torpedoes is that they are extremely target specific. Torpedoes lose their effectiveness on anything smaller than something the size of a Hammerhead, because smaller ships could dodge them without any considerable effort. This is where the Polaris' turret complement comes in, which is majorly anti-fighter focused. Now, the turret complement is still debated over as of the making of this video. The official stats on the Star Citizen website have not been changed after the rework was announced, so I'll be going off of what I saw in the white box video that CIG released during last CitizenCon. At the moment, it looks like we have 4 size 4 turrets, a size 3 turret, and 1 size 5 turret. The size 4 turret complement is made up by 4 dual turrets, the size 5 nose turret is a dual turret, and the size 3 turret is a quad turret on the underside. Now, size 4 guns are universally accepted, for the most part, as the largest size gun that is still effective against light fighters. This is why the Hammerhead's entire turret complement is made up of size 4 repeaters. It's a dedicated anti-fighter gunship. My issue comes with the gap we face. We already have the torpedoes to deal with most subcap and capital ships, and the turrets to deal with light fighters. However, we are stuck with that awkward in-between. The in-between that is filled by Redeemers, Valkyries, Retaliators. I am not fully convinced that the Polaris, by itself, would be able to effectively defend against an attack of ships like these, especially considering the extremely limited range of motion the positioning of the size 5 turret offers, on the underside near the nose of the ship. In fact, when attacked from the rear, the only thing properly defending the Polaris is an array of anti-aircraft missiles, which are likely to deplete very quickly in an extended combat encounter. Now, this issue is partially relieved by the fact that the Polaris is equipped with a hangar, and as per the sitcon video, is large enough to comfortably house something like a Scorpius. The problem with relying on an extra fighter is that this fighter does not get to take advantage of the larger coolers, power plant, and shield generators of the capital ship it launches from. Any smart commander would target this fighter immediately, and then you're back to square one. All in all, this is probably one of the Polaris' main weaknesses in my opinion. This is why I would choose to deploy the Polaris with an accompanying medium or heavy fighter unit. You don't need the maneuverability of a light fighter, as the only thing you need to outmaneuver are these larger gunships, and the higher damage output of something like an F7 or an F8 will ensure you can swiftly take care of these larger craft and return to formation. There's also the issue that comes with relying upon expendable ordnance as a main weapon. Whereas the Javelin can shoot its main guns for as long as it receives power, the Polaris gets 28 torpedoes. That's it. After that, you need to return to resupply before you prepare to take on any more capital class targets. This once more emphasizes the fact that this is a hit-and-run capital ship. It is not designed for prolonged encounters. It is meant to identify a target, deliver its payload, and then get the hell out of there. However, when used as designed, I believe the Polaris is more than capable of taking on a wide variety of targets, especially when paired with a proper fleet of fighter craft. Anyways, the ship has been enlarged since its original design, but it is still the smallest capital ship available. This means it is the strongest candidate to land planetside, and I imagine it as a ship that could be used to establish a forward operating base. It is the only capital ship with a ramp coming down from the cargo hold, meaning it is significantly easier to offload vehicles, troops, and supplies. As to the cargo hold itself, well, it's a bit complicated. Now, the other main thing to consider is its ability to fulfill its role as a capital ship, a home base. A main characteristic of a capital ship is its ability to be self-sufficient, to house the facilities necessary to the extent that it doesn't need to rely on outside ships in most scenarios. Now, the updated Polaris layout was revealed to us during an Inside Star Citizen episode, and the CitizenCon showcase showed us that they are sticking with this new modified layout. Now, there's something I want to debunk. I've heard some people saying that the Polaris is no longer 2 floors and that everything was going to be on the first floor is stuck behind the hangar. This is not true. I can see how one could believe this given the nature of the video fly-through, but I want you to look at this. The door here doesn't open because the camera teleports you to the lower deck. I mean, think about it. Here we see the torpedoes facing the back of the ship, since we enter the fly-through via the cockpit. It doesn't make sense. Just wanted to get that out of the way. I couldn't find official dimensions anywhere, so I took it upon myself to do a few calculations. Excuse my very poor Google Slides diagrams. Now, the way I did this is as follows. I stretched out 2 bars, one representing the total width of the ship, and one representing the width of the cargo bay. I then calculate the factor of change between the 2 lengths, and multiply that by the total width to get the width of the cargo bay. In other words, this bar is 0.237 times the size of the longer bar, which represents the total width of the ship. Since I know the cargo bay is 0.237 times the width of the ship, I can multiply this number by the total width to get my width in meters. You can see here that I did the same thing for the length. Now here we arrive at an issue. Look at the difference between these 2 lengths, 30.36 meters versus 18.4 meters. That's a factor of change of about 61%. If I take the snapshot of the cargo hold alone, like in this picture, we have a factor of change of about 85%, which is a margin of error large enough to raise a few eyebrows. Since the picture is clearly about a square, I decided to stick with the 85% value, and use that as a factor of change instead. So as you can see, my final calculated dimensions are as shown, 30.4 meters by 25.8 meters. Keeping this in mind, I put together a quick diagram that illustrates the vehicle capacity a cargo hold this size could provide. I included multiple iterations with various types of vehicles represented by correctly scaled blocks. As you can see, the Polaris is more than capable of housing a company of Marines in their vehicles, so if ground ops was something that's important to your organization, the Polaris actually performs this fairly well. I've probably already spent a lot longer than I need to on the cargo hold though, so I'm going to go over the rest of the ship. Now, there isn't a whole lot more to go over on the first floor. What I'm mostly interested in is what we have on the second. The first floor houses our engineering, torpedo room, and cargo bay. The second floor houses, well, everything else. Now, the first thing that stands out here is the hangar. The hangar will have the ability to accommodate a small to mid-sized fighter. It's been confirmed once more, as per the SitCon video, that something as large as a Scorpius can fit inside, which makes sense as the Scorpius is RSI's flagship fighter spacecraft. Something really interesting is the inclusion of a cargo elevator in the corner of the hangar. This connects directly to the cargo bay below, meaning it's much easier to transport things like spare parts directly from the cargo hold. This isn't something we have seen in current ships with hangars like the Carrack or the A90 Jump, and I think that this is a feature that will greatly enhance the combat effectiveness of the housed fighter, as it allows for it to undergo repair and rearm procedures much more efficiently. Along one of the edges of the hangar, we have the medbay. Now, from the looks of it, this medbay will house 2 Tier 2 and 2 Tier 3 medical beds. Considering the relatively small crew complement of the Polaris, this is more than adequate, and the fact that there are 2 Tier 2 beds means that the Polaris will be able to serve as a respawn point, which is crucial if serving as a flagship or operating independently under a smaller task force. On the other end of the hangar, we have our brig cells. Now ideally we don't have any unruly crew members on board, so I like to imagine the brig as a place to store enemy prisoners of war instead. Brigs are crucial on board larger military craft because it means you don't have to kill everyone you see, and it provides a secure holding location for any civilians you may want to transport as well, such as during rescue operations. This greatly broadens the abilities of the Polaris as it expands its operational capabilities beyond purely combat missions, and this is further reinforced by the extensive capabilities of the medical facilities on board. Now a little bit further forward we have our habitation section. The Polaris, like literally any other military ship of this size, is equipped with a mess hall, which is important because if you can't feed your crew, they die. The bunk room across seems to have a 12-man capacity. Combined with the captain's and CO's quarters, that leaves 14 total beds, which seems to be adequate considering the Polaris' advertised crew complement of 14. Of course, hot bunking is always an option if needed. Now on the topic of the captain's and CO's quarters, this is going to be the first ship available to players that has a dedicated berth for the CO and not just the captain. Since the Polaris is a larger sized military ship, there are going to be multiple high-ranking officers on board, and the fact that the Polaris is able to accommodate these is a very important design feature when it comes to military structure. One last thing I wanted to cover in regards to the layout is the addition of an armory. We've seen iterations of armories on board ships before, but it usually consists of a random weapon locker stuck in a hallway. They rarely get their own dedicated room. The location of the armory near the bridge and adjacent to where the crew will be spending their downtime is very important. If the ship is boarded, the single room that must not be taken is the bridge, so the location of the armory here makes it easier to defend this part of the ship. Now, closing out the video, I want to end with my final thoughts. The Polaris is a very interesting ship, fulfilling a much needed role rather cheaply but effectively. It serves as a springboard, an easier way to get into capital ship gameplay without the need of thousands of dollars and a crew of 50 people. It is still extremely effective at what it is designed to do, which is hunt down and destroy targets more powerful and larger than itself. Now, I've already dragged this video on for longer than I needed to, so I'll go ahead and end it here. If you enjoyed the video, I encourage you to leave a comment, and if you have any questions or criticism, do not hesitate to comment those as well. I'm always looking for ways to improve my videos. One last thing, if you're looking for a military org to join, I'm trying to start one up, and we need as many people as we can get. I've posted the link to our Discord server in the description if you're interested. And with that, farewell citizens, I'll see you next time.